Every day, our thoughts, decisions, and actions are shaped by the people around us, often in ways we scarcely notice. From the subtle encouragement of a friend to the silent pressure of a crowd, social influence weaves through the fabric of our lives, guiding how we behave, what we believe, and even who we become. This influence is neither new nor accidental. It has been a constant force throughout human history, playing a crucial role in the survival and cohesion of groups. Understanding social influence means examining not only the ways we are affected by others, but also how we, in turn, affect those around us. The landscape of social influence is vast, stretching from everyday conversations to sweeping cultural shifts. By exploring its foundations and mechanisms, we begin to see the invisible threads that bind individuals together and the profound impact those threads can have. Imagine, for a moment, walking into a crowded room. Instinctively, you scan the faces, observe the group's posture, and listen to the tone of the conversation. Without even realizing it, you begin to adjust your own behavior, perhaps lowering your voice, changing your stance, or choosing your words to fit the social setting. This subtle, almost automatic response to the presence of others lies at the heart of social influence, a phenomenon so fundamental that it shapes nearly every aspect of human life. Social influence describes how our interactions with others shape our thoughts, interests, and behaviors. It is the quiet force that nudges us to follow social norms, obey authority figures, or conform to the expectations of those around us. Sometimes, this influence is felt as an explicit request or demand, like a friend urging us to try something new. Other times, it is implicit, woven into the fabric of daily life, guiding our choices in ways we might not consciously recognize. Whether it is the way we dress, the opinions we share, or the decisions we make, social influence is present in nearly every choice, big or small. At its core, social influence is about adaptation. It is the process by which individuals adjust their behavior to meet the demands of their social environment. The need to belong, to be accepted, and to connect with others often drives us to act in ways that align with the group. Sometimes, this drive is so powerful that it leads us to adopt behaviors or attitudes that go against our private beliefs or even our best interests, simply for the comfort of acceptance. To understand social influence, it helps to consider its different forms. Psychologists and sociologists have long studied the various ways people affect one another. One of the most prominent frameworks identifies three major types: conformity, compliance, and obedience. Conformity refers to adjusting one's behavior or attitudes to align with those of a group. Compliance involves changing one's behavior in response to a direct request, even if one might privately disagree. Obedience, on the other hand, is following orders from an authority figure. Each of these forms involves the exercise of social power, whether it comes from a peer group, a persuasive leader, or the subtle pressures of social norms. The roots of social influence run deep in our evolutionary and cultural history. While the term social psychology only emerged in the early 20th century, research on social influence began as early as the 1880s. These early studies explored how individuals behave in groups and how collective dynamics can shape personal beliefs and actions. Over time, scholars recognize that most human activities occur within groups, and that groups play a fundamental role in shaping individual behavior. Groups satisfy our need to belong, provide valuable information and understanding, and help define our sense of identity. In turn, the influence that groups exert on their members is profound, shaping not only what we do, but also how we think and feel. One of the most influential theories in the study of social influence was developed in the 1950s by Herbert Kellman. Kellman's social influence theory built upon earlier research into conformity and social dynamics, as well as concepts from cognitive dissonance and attitude theory. He proposed that social influence operates through three primary processes: compliance, identification, and internalization. Compliance occurs when individuals change their behavior to gain rewards or avoid punishment, often without altering their underlying beliefs. Identification happens when people adopt behaviors or attitudes to establish or maintain a satisfying, self-defining relationship with another person or group. Internalization represents the deepest form, in which a person adopts beliefs or behaviors because they align with their own values and sense of self. Kellman emphasized that attitudes are not simply personal choices. Rather, they are products of society, regulated by the conventions, values, norms, and rules that surround us. Another foundational contribution came from Morton Deutsch and Harold Gerard, who distinguished between two psychological needs that drive conformity. The first is informational social influence, the desire to be right. When we are uncertain about how to act or what to believe, we often look to others for guidance, assuming the group knows better. The second is normative social influence, the need to be liked. Here, the motivation is not accuracy, but acceptance. We conform because we want to fit in and be approved by others. Together, these needs explain much of why people adapt their opinions, revise their beliefs, or change their behavior as a result of social interactions. The mechanisms underlying social influence are varied and complex. They include not only conformity, compliance, and obedience, but also processes like socialization, peer pressure, leadership, persuasion, and the techniques used in sales and marketing. Scholars have noted that imitation, conformity, and adherence to social norms form the deeper foundation of how influence works in human societies. From childhood, we learn by observing and mimicking others, internalizing the unwritten rules of our culture, and gradually adapting our behavior to fit the expectations of those around us. Social influence is not merely a psychological curiosity, it plays a powerful role in shaping the collective behavior of societies. In a world that is increasingly interconnected, influence can ripple out in unexpected ways, leading to phenomena like herding in cultural markets, the rapid spread of new ideas and innovations, or the amplification of fears during epidemics. When people see others behaving in a certain way, whether it is flocking to a new product, sharing a viral video, or stockpiling supplies, they are more likely to follow suit, often without fully considering the reasons behind their actions. Sociology, as a discipline, studies how individuals act and evolve within social groups. It emphasizes that personal decisions are rarely made in isolation. Instead, they are shaped by broader cultural trends, beliefs, and values. Sociologists examine human behavior by looking at individual encounters, group interactions, and the wider social processes that influence them. This perspective highlights the importance of context, how the norms and expectations of a particular time and place can shape what is considered acceptable or desirable. Complexity science and dynamical systems have also contributed to our understanding of social influence, offering tools to analyze how simple individual interactions can give rise to complex group behaviors. While this approach provides powerful insights into the self-organized nature of social phenomena, it also underscores the unpredictability and adaptability of human societies. Despite decades of research, many questions remain about the workings of social influence. Scholars generally agree that it is a deeply embedded part of human life, touching everything from our most mundane choices to the grand currents of cultural change. Yet, the precise ways in which influence operates and the factors that make us more or less susceptible to it continue to be explored. As we move forward, it is important to recognize that social influence is not inherently negative or positive. It can lead individuals to adopt healthier behaviors, promote cooperation and understanding, or foster creativity and innovation. At the same time, it can also encourage conformity at the expense of individuality, perpetuate harmful norms, or contribute to the spread of misinformation. Ultimately, understanding the foundations of social influence gives us the tools to navigate the complex web of relationships that define our lives, and to make more informed choices about how we respond to the many voices that shape our world. Social influence weaves through nearly every interaction, shaping how people think, feel, and act. When we examine the mechanisms of social influence more closely, three distinct yet overlapping processes emerge: conformity, compliance, and obedience. Each operates under different circumstances, but all reveal the remarkable power of social forces to guide human behavior, often in ways we might not expect from ourselves. Imagine standing in a public plaza. A few people stop and gaze upward at nothing in particular. Soon, others begin to follow. They look up too, scanning the sky for any sign of what everyone else might be seeing. This seemingly trivial act is an example of conformity, a process in which individuals adjust their behavior or attitudes to align with those of a group. Conformity does not always require direct communication. Often, the mere presence or implied expectations of others are enough. Classic investigations into conformity, notably those conducted by Salm and Ash in the 1950s, shed light on just how deeply group pressure can affect individual judgment. In these now famous experiments, participants sat with a group and were asked to complete a simple perceptual task: match the length of a line to one of three comparison lines. What most participants did not know was that the other people in the room were part of the experiment, deliberately giving incorrect answers. Faced with the unanimous but obviously mistaken judgments of the group, a significant portion of participants went along with the crowd. Even when the correct choice seemed clear, the pull of the majority swayed their responses. According to the findings, participants conformed to the incorrect group answer about 1/3 of the time. In fact, around 75% of people in Ash's studies conformed to group pressure at least once during the experiment. The urge to fit in or avoid standing out, known as normative social influence, proved powerful, with participants often explaining afterward that they did not want to risk ridicule or social disapproval. Further analysis of these experiments has identified several factors that can increase or decrease conformity. The size of the majority matters. As the group grows, so does the pressure to conform up to a certain point. The presence of even one dissenter can dramatically reduce conformity, showing how a single voice of disagreement can encourage others to trust their own judgments. Whether responses are given publicly or privately also plays a role. When people can respond in private, away from the gaze of others, they are less likely to conform. Interestingly, replications of the Ash experiment have consistently found error rates of about 33% for the standard task, even when monetary incentives are offered to encourage accuracy. This suggests that social influence is not simply about rewards and punishments. It taps into a deeper human need to belong and be accepted. Conformity is only one aspect of social influence. A second mechanism, compliance, involves yielding to a request, whether explicit or implicit. Unlike conformity, which often arises from group norms or expectations, compliance is typically triggered by a direct appeal from another person. These requests can be as simple as a friend asking for a favor or as calculated as a salesperson urging a customer to try a product. A well-known example of compliance is the foot-in-the-door technique. In this approach, a small initial request is made, something so reasonable that most people agree. Once this request is granted, a larger request follows. Research by Friedman and Fraser showed how this method increases the likelihood that people will comply with a second, more substantial request. The explanation is that, having said yes to the first, individuals want to appear consistent, both to themselves and to others. Compliance, however, tends to be superficial and temporary. It is often motivated by the desire for approval or the fear of disapproval, rather than a genuine change in beliefs. People may agree outwardly while privately holding on to their original opinions. Social influence works in both subtle and overt ways, and compliance can be seen in everyday situations. From agreeing to complete a survey after being asked for just a few minutes of your time, to donating money after first signing a non-binding petition. The mechanism is not limited to personal interactions. Organizations, marketers, and political campaigns all use compliance techniques to sway public behavior. Obedience, the third core mechanism, takes the process a step further. Here, the influence comes not from peers or simple requests, but from authority figures wielding power. The most striking demonstration of obedience comes from the studies conducted by Stanley Milgram in the early 1960s. Milgram's shock experiments asked participants to administer what they believed were real electric shocks to another person, under the instruction of a lab-coated experimenter. The shocks increased in intensity at each step, and although the recipient was an actor and the shocks were not real, participants were unaware of the deception. The results were astonishing and unsettling. Every participant delivered shocks up to 300 volts, and a full 65% continued all the way to the maximum of 450 volts, despite hearing protests and cries of pain from the supposed victim. Milgram's experiments were designed in the aftermath of World War II, aiming to understand how ordinary people could be compelled to carry out harmful acts simply because they were just following orders. What emerged from his work was a profile of obedience that was less about individual pathology and more about the situational power of authority. When an instruction came from a figure perceived as legitimate, direct, and consistent, people were much more likely to obey even when the action clashed with their personal morals. Factors such as the proximity of the authority figure, the clarity of instructions, and the presence of others who either complied or resisted all influenced the likelihood of obedience. For example, group pressure to disobey could reduce obedience while isolation increased it. Obedience is not limited to laboratory settings. Across institutions, schools, workplaces, the military, and government, the expectation to heed authority is woven into the fabric of society. While this can promote order and efficiency, it also raises profound ethical questions when obedience leads to harm. A more complex form of social influence emerges when people are assigned roles that carry power or powerlessness. The Stanford Prison Experiment, led by Philip Zimbardo in 1971, set out to explore how assigning people to the roles of guards and prisoners would affect their behavior. College students were randomly divided into these groups and placed in a simulated prison environment. The results were both rapid and extreme. Those assigned as guards quickly became authoritarian and, in many cases, abusive, while prisoners exhibited clear signs of stress and submission. What stunned observers was not any inherent tendency toward cruelty or passivity in the participants, but how swiftly and thoroughly the situation itself shaped their actions. The Stanford Prison Experiment demonstrated that even brief exposure to certain social roles, paired with institutional support, could drastically alter individual behavior. The power of the situation, more than personal disposition, became the driving force. This finding has influenced thinking not only in psychology but also in broader conversations about responsibility, justice, and institutional reform. Social influence does not operate in a vacuum. It is shaped by the interplay of situational factors, individual goals, and the mechanisms that select and direct action. Some scholars have argued that persuasion operates by targeting a person's goals, what they want to achieve, while obedience targets the mechanisms by which people choose between actions. In more extreme cases, coercion or violence can override choice entirely, forcing action regardless of belief or desire. At the same time, social influence can be classified by its function: utilitarian, focused on practical benefit; value expressive, serving to express identity or allegiance; or informational, helping people decide what is true or correct. The study of social influence, therefore, is a study of how the currents of society run through each of us. Whether we conform to a group, comply with a request, obey an authority, or even influence others as a minority, these mechanisms reveal both our vulnerabilities and our capacity for adaptation. The experiments and observations described here are not just stories about other people. They are mirrors, reflecting the hidden forces that shape our own lives, often without our full awareness. Understanding these mechanisms is not merely academic, it is a step toward greater self-knowledge and perhaps greater agency in a world of constant influence. Every day, often without realizing it, we are swept along by the invisible currents of social influence. These forces guide us as we talk with family, negotiate our roles at work, or scroll through online communities. At its core, social influence refers to the ways our thoughts, behaviors, and decisions are shaped by those around us. In practice, it appears in countless forms, from the subtle encouragement to try a new restaurant because a friend recommended it, to the more obvious pressure to dress a certain way, support a political cause, or adopt a viewpoint we might not have considered on our own. Within families, social influence is woven into daily life. Parental behavior, for example, plays a significant role in shaping a child's early habits and attitudes. The warmth or psychological control parents express does more than determine a child's immediate compliance. It also shapes self-esteem and, over time, resilience to outside pressures. As children become adolescents, peer influence grows stronger. This is when susceptibility to peer pressure can affect risk behaviors, such as experimenting with substances or skipping school. While parental guidance remains, it is often filtered through the adolescent's increasing desire for acceptance among friends. The interplay between parental warmth, psychological control, and the adolescent's self-esteem creates a complex environment where choices are made, some leading to positive outcomes, others to riskier paths. Importantly, resisting negative peer pressure is not just a matter of willpower. Self-awareness, often developed through regular self-reflection, helps teenagers clarify their values and build confidence in decision-making, giving them tools to resist conformity when it conflicts with their beliefs. Peer pressure does not disappear after high school. In early adulthood, peer influence remains strong, whether in choosing which events to attend, adopting certain habits, or making financial decisions. Take, for instance, college students and alcohol consumption. Those who set clear limits on their drinking, often to avoid negative consequences, are generally more successful at resisting peer pressure, especially if they are not part of Greek organizations where group norms around drinking may be stronger. As people age, their ability to resist conformity tends to increase. Middle-aged and older adults are generally better at controlling their desires and standing by their choices, suggesting that resistance to social conformity strengthens throughout adulthood. Beyond home and social circles, social influence shapes the workplace as well. Here, it affects everything from how we communicate to the standards by which we judge success. Social norms, collectively held beliefs about what is appropriate in a given situation, are powerful guides. Learned through cultural exposure and socialization, they operate both on the surface and at a subconscious level. Some norms are subjective, based on perceived social pressure, while others are injunctive, reflecting what is explicitly approved or disapproved by others. In professional settings, norms dictate how meetings are run, how employees dress, and even how ideas are shared or received. These norms do more than encourage certain behaviors. They can also limit our imagination, effectively excluding behaviors that go against the norm. The result is a workplace culture that both shapes and is shaped by the individuals within it. Persuasion is another thread running through daily interactions, from the ordinary to the significant. It is the process by which one person or group tries to influence another's beliefs or behaviors. In healthy relationships, persuasion can foster growth, encourage new ways of thinking, and help people reach compromises. But persuasion is not always neutral. It can be a double-edged sword. Some use persuasive skills to exert undue influence, sometimes with negative consequences. The line between healthy persuasion and manipulation can be thin, especially where power dynamics exist. Decisions to share information and the effects of that communication are guided by changes in how we value outcomes, weighing both personal goals and social considerations. In other words, when we influence or are influenced by others, we constantly calculate what matters most to ourselves and those around us. Online communities, which have existed for over 4 decades, have become powerful arenas for social influence. These virtual spaces, once seen as separate from real life, now have increasing impact on beliefs and behaviors offline. The social dynamics of online networks mirror and sometimes amplify those found in face-to-face settings. A striking example comes from a large-scale experiment on Facebook during the 2010 United States congressional elections. In this study, political mobilization messages encouraged users to vote. The results showed that these messages influenced not only users' political self-expression and information seeking, but also their real-world voting patterns. More importantly, the effect of social transmission, seeing friends engage with the messages, was greater than the direct effect of the messages themselves. This highlights the profound role social connections play in spreading influence, extending a message's reach far beyond its original audience. The reach of online influence goes beyond politics. From fashion trends and consumer choices to charitable giving and health behaviors, virtual communities shape what people see as possible, desirable, or necessary. Sometimes this influence is positive, as when social media campaigns raise awareness about important issues or encourage healthy habits. Other times, the effects are less beneficial, such as the rapid spread of misinformation or the rise of cyberbullying. The anonymity and scale of online platforms can intensify peer pressure, making it easier for harmful behaviors to take hold. At the same time, these platforms are designed to leverage social influence, with algorithms surfacing content popular among one's peers, reinforcing existing beliefs and sometimes narrowing the range of perspectives considered. Whether in person or online, social norms act as the invisible architecture of social life. They do more than tell us what to do, they shape what we imagine is possible, guiding our choices even before we are fully aware of them. This influence is highly contextual, shifting with the setting, the group, and the moment. For example, the norms at a family dinner differ from those at a workplace meeting or in a group chat. In each context, there are rules, both spoken and unspoken, about what is acceptable, encouraged, or out of bounds. These norms are not fixed, they evolve as groups change, new members join, and societies adapt to new challenges. The outcomes of social influence are rarely straightforward. On the positive side, it can inspire generosity, support learning, and foster belonging. When people see others giving to charity, they are more likely to do the same. When communities rally around health campaigns, individuals are more likely to adopt beneficial habits. But social influence also has a darker side. Peer pressure can lead to risky behaviors such as adolescent delinquency, or to subtler harms like the exclusion of those who do not fit in. In online spaces, the same mechanisms that create vibrant communities can also fuel echo chambers or amplify hostility. The balance between positive and negative outcomes often depends on individual self-awareness, the quality of relationships, and the broader cultural norms that define what is acceptable. Ultimately, social influence is not something we can avoid. It is a fundamental part of being human, woven into every relationship, institution, and interaction, whether in the living room, the boardroom, or the digital commons. Understanding how social influence operates in everyday life does more than satisfy curiosity. It offers a path to greater self-awareness, helping us recognize when we are being guided by others and when we are charting our own course. In a world where influence is everywhere, that awareness serves as both a shield and a compass, guiding us toward choices that reflect not just the will of the group, but the values we hold most dear. Navigating the currents of social influence is both an art and a science. Every day, subtle forces nudge us, sometimes gently, sometimes with greater urgency, toward new beliefs, behaviors, or attitudes. Whether it is a friend's persuasive suggestion, a workplace trend, or the collective sway of a group, influence is ever present. Yet, the ability to recognize these forces, resist undue pressure, and, when appropriate, ethically harness influence ourselves is a skill that can be learned and refined. This final chapter is about equipping you with the tools to do just that, to become a more conscious participant in the web of social influence, both as a resilient individual and a responsible influencer. Resisting social influence begins with the recognition that not every attempt to shape our thinking or actions serves our best interests. Sometimes, influence has a positive, pro-social purpose. Other times, it may threaten our autonomy, encourage conformity at the expense of authenticity, or even cross the line into manipulation. Researchers have identified core strategies people use to resist persuasion. These include avoidance, sidestepping situations, or individuals known for their persuasive power, contesting, actively questioning the message or the messenger, engaging in bias processing, interpreting information in a way that favors one's pre-existing attitudes, and empowerment, boosting one's own confidence and agency to resist external pressures. These strategies are often triggered by internal motivations, such as a perceived threat to personal freedom, reluctance to change established beliefs, or concerns about being deceived. The ability to withstand social pressure is not distributed equally among all individuals. Some people find it easier to hold their ground, while others are more susceptible to the pull of the group or the demands of authority. This variation is shaped by both situational and dispositional factors. For instance, having even a single supportive ally can greatly increase one's ability to resist group pressure. Dispositional factors, such as a person's locus of control, the degree to which they believe they have control over their own life, are also important. Individuals with a strong internal locus of control, who see themselves as the architects of their fate, are more likely to resist external influence than those with an external locus, who attribute outcomes to outside forces or luck. Resistance strategies are not limited to rare or dramatic situations. They are relevant to the countless attempts at persuasion we encounter daily. These range from advertising pitches and political messaging to peer nudges and digital notifications designed to capture our attention and shape our choices. Developing a toolkit for resistance is, therefore, a practical necessity in modern life. Among the most effective techniques is focusing on substance over style. A message that dazzles with charisma, emotional appeals, or slick presentation should not distract from the core question: what is actually being said, and does it hold up to scrutiny? Challenging assumptions, seeking additional information, and considering the underlying motives of those attempting to influence us are likewise potent forms of resistance. These strategies help us slow down automatic responses and make decisions that are more reflective and aligned with our values. Critical thinking is the thread that weaves these resistance strategies together. At its core, critical thinking involves the disciplined analysis of information, the willingness to question one's own beliefs, and the capacity to understand the perspectives and narratives of others. It is not merely a set of skills, but a mindset, one that can be cultivated through regular practice and self-reflection. When faced with an attempt at persuasion, a critical thinker listens actively, seeks evidence, and weighs arguments on their merits rather than on the basis of who delivers them or how forcefully they are expressed. This approach not only helps in resisting unwelcome influence, but also fosters a deeper understanding of group dynamics and the subtle ways in which social pressure can shape our attitudes and behaviors. Self-awareness is another essential ingredient. By tuning into our own reactions, asking why a particular message makes us feel defensive, compliant, or enthusiastic, we gain insight into the levers of influence that are most effective on us. This awareness can act as an early warning system, alerting us when we are at risk of being swayed against our better judgment. Over time, self-awareness and critical thinking reinforce each other, creating a virtuous cycle that enhances our ability to stand firm in the face of social pressure. Of course, resisting influence is only half the story. Social influence, when applied ethically, can be a powerful mechanism for positive change. In policy and organizational settings, for example, harnessing the power of influence can be both cost-effective and impactful. However, the success of targeted interventions designed to spark broader behavioral change depends on a nuanced understanding of the population in question, their values, their communal ties, and their susceptibility to different forms of influence. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. What works in one context may fall flat in another. Ethical persuasion requires more than just mastery of technique. It is rooted in a sense of responsibility, an understanding that to influence another is to take on a duty of care. Leaders, in particular, must recognize their legal, economic, and ethical obligations to the people and organizations they serve. Ethical leadership is not simply about avoiding harm. It is about using reflective judgment and self-awareness to make choices that are beneficial, just, and respectful of the autonomy of others. This means resisting the temptation to manipulate or coerce, even when the outcome seems desirable, and instead striving to create win-win situations. The principles of social responsibility extend beyond individuals to organizations and corporations. Social responsibility is an ethical framework in which actions are guided by the goal of benefiting society, not just maximizing self-interest or profit. In the business world, this means aligning profit-making activities with a commitment to positive social impact, building trust with stakeholders, and promoting fairness. Ethical conduct in organizations is shaped, in large part, by the social influences embedded in their cultures. By understanding and shaping these influences, Organizations can foster environments that encourage ethical behavior while reducing the incidence of unethical practices. The question, then, is how to ethically apply social influence. One of the most well-studied frameworks comes from Robert Cialdini, who identified a set of universal principles that guide human behavior. These include reciprocity, the impulse to return favors, scarcity, valuing what is rare, authority, deferring to experts, consistency, aligning with past commitments, liking, being influenced by those we find agreeable, social proof, following the actions of others, and unity, identifying with a group. These principles are not inherently manipulative. They reflect natural human tendencies that, when understood, can be used to persuade in ways that are transparent and mutually beneficial. The key lies in intent and application, employing these principles to foster cooperation, build consensus, and support informed decision-making, rather than to deceive or exploit. Mastery of social influence, then, involves a balance. It is the ability to recognize when influence is being wielded inappropriately and to mount a thoughtful defense, but also the wisdom to use influence ethically and effectively in pursuit of shared goals. This balance is not static. It requires ongoing reflection, a willingness to learn from experience, and a commitment to personal and collective responsibility. In a world where influence is both a resource and a risk, cultivating critical thinking, self-awareness, and ethical intent is perhaps the most important work we can do, both for ourselves and for the communities we are part of. By practicing these skills and holding ourselves accountable for the ways we influence others, we not only protect our own autonomy, but also contribute to a more just, respectful, and flourishing society.